Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Lipakshi Khurana, coming up in the next 30 minutes. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, on a visit to United Kingdom, says India has leadership, vision and good governance. Stage is set in San Francisco for the APEC summit that President Joe Biden will host this week. India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal to take part in this event. 5 U.S. Special Operation troops killed when their helicopter crashes into Mediterranean Sea during a training mission. India's middle order thrills spectators at Bengaluru against the Netherlands. Shreyas Iyer and KL Rahul hit centuries. On to details now. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has said that India is the fastest growing large economy today, noting that there is leadership, vision and good governance. Jaishankar said this during an interaction with Indian community in London. The minister also said that the Indian community's contributions are raising India's profile around the world. The minister, who is on a 5-day visit to the UK, visited and prayed at the BAPS Sri Swaminarayan Mandir in London.
So, I want to show you things are going very well at home. You can see that in the manner in which we had a very, very successful G20 presidency in very difficult circumstances. The world did not believe that we could get everybody together. And it took a Prime Minister like Narendra Modi to do that. Similarly, we have come through a very difficult period like the entire world has on COVID. But India is today the fastest growing large economy, and there is a very good reason. It is growing because today there is leadership, there is vision, there is good governance.
Well, during his visit to the UK, Dr. S. Jaishankar met Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in London on Sunday and conveyed the best wishes of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Diwali. Jaishankar is in the United Kingdom on an official trip to review various aspects of bilateral ties and to hold meetings with his counterpart, UK Foreign Secretary James Cleverly, and several other dignitaries. Well, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen met with financial chiefs from Indonesia, Mexico and Australia ahead of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation APEC leaders meeting in San Francisco. She emphasized a wish for continuous international collaboration. The APEC meeting will take place from November 15th to 17th, and it is scheduled to include a meeting between U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping.
This is a particularly exciting time for bilateral relations between the United States and Indonesia, as the timing of our ministerial coincides with President Jokowi's visit to Washington, marking a new phase of bilateral cooperation and friendship between the world's second and third largest democracies. We continue to strengthen bilateral relations between our nations. This meeting follows a very successful state visit by Prime Minister Albanese last month, in which he and President Biden helped inaugurate a new era of U.S.-Australia strategic cooperation.
Well, the stage is set in San Francisco for the biggest international event the city has hosted since 1945. Leaders from across the Asia-Pacific are flying in for the APEC summit that President Joe Biden will host this week. India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal is also taking part in this event. DD India's Simon Marks is at the summit site in San Francisco.
India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal will represent Prime Minister Narendra Modi at this year's APEC summit here in San Francisco, the first APEC summit to be held on American soil since 2011. The agenda is absolutely vast, and over the course of the last few hours here in San Francisco, fresh pressure has been applied on both President Biden, the host of the summit, and Chinese President Xi Jinping ahead of their meeting face-to-face on the sidelines of this event on Wednesday. It took fully a year for Washington and Beijing to negotiate even the possibility of a face-to-face meeting between the two men. So tense has the bilateral relationship between Washington and Beijing been, especially in the months since the United States shot down that Chinese surveillance balloon flying in American airspace. On Wednesday, it comes at a time, of course, when President Biden will be traveling to this APEC summit to reinforce the notion that the United States sees itself as a Pacific power and is absolutely determined to deepen its partnership with its partners across the Indo-Pacific in a bid to try and counter China's expansionist tendencies. Other issues where there may be difficulties making headway include the crisis underway in the Gaza Strip. There is disagreement among many of the countries attending this APEC summit over precisely who is to blame for the intensifying crisis in the Middle East. Many of APEC's 21 member states want the United States to liberalize its approach to trade, to allow market access, even perhaps to agree to begin the negotiation of free trade agreements. The Biden administration does not appear to be coming to this summit with that kind of an approach in mind. 78 years ago, has San Francisco seen an international gathering like this. The city has cleaned up in the immediate vicinity around the Moscone Center where this summit is being held. Big stakes here, a big event, and of course enormous outcomes banking on it that will come out of this conference for nations throughout the Indo-Pacific. Simon Marks for DD India at the APEC summit in San Francisco.
And moving on, Indonesia's President Joko Widodo is set to hold a bilateral meeting with US President Joe Biden later on Monday. The talks will aim to deepen trade ties between the two nations, but issues including China and the situation in Gaza will also feature prominently. US correspondent reports from New York.
According to a statement from the White House, Joe Biden and Joko Widodo's discussions will focus on deepening the partnership between the world's second and third largest democracies. The White House adds a little bit more information on what the two leaders will be discussing, including cooperation on clean energy transitions, advancing economic prosperity, and ensuring a free and open Indo-Pacific. We can also expect the issue of China to dominate much of the conversations, likely, according to analysts here from Indonesia's leader, calling for the US and China to cool tensions. This comes just a few days before President Joe Biden is expected to meet his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in San Francisco in just a few days' time. Economics will likely feature very prominently in this bilateral meeting between the leaders of the US and Indonesia. Some analysts saying we might expect a limited free trade agreement. Much of the focus will be on market access to critical minerals, especially nickel, produced by Indonesia, that could play a pivotal role when it comes to easing US supply chain issues as it looks to ramp up the production of electric vehicles in the future. The issue of Gaza will likely also be in focus and will likely be discussed. Joko Widodo has described the humanitarian situation in Gaza as unacceptable. Joe Biden, the US president, has been pushing for more humanitarian pauses to see a more humanitarian access into the Palestinian enclave. But, of course, the United States has historically been a staunch ally of Israel. William Denslow in New York reporting for DD India.
And as a U.S. Navy surveillance plane flew in circles, keeping a close watch, dozens of Chinese Coast Guard and accompanying ships chased and encircled Philippine vessels in the latest confrontation in one of the most dangerous flashpoints in the South China Sea. At the height of Friday's 4-hour face-off in the high seas, a Chinese Coast Guard ship blasted a water cannon towards a Philippine motorboat delivering food and other supplies to Filipino forces on a marooned, rusting warship that serves as the country's fragile territorial outpost at Second Thomas Shoal. And India correspondent Patrick Falk reports from Singapore about one of the most dangerous encounters amid all the recent confrontations we've seen between China and the Philippines in the South China Sea.
At least 38 Chinese vessels in the vicinity of the Second Thomas Shoal, including a Chinese naval fast assault craft. And we're told that the Chinese carried out a series of maneuvers and blockades, essentially trying to hamper a Philippine resupply mission to the BRP Sierra Madre, which, as we've said before, is basically a crumbling old vessel stationed at the Second Thomas Shoal, really there to assert the Philippines' sovereignty. And the face-off, according to reports, went on for about 4 hours, at the height of which, as you said, the Chinese side fired a water cannon at a Philippine motorboat. That in itself is dangerous, but also the fact that the Sierra Madre is an actively commissioned warship means that any sort of attack on it would be considered an act of war. All of this while, as you mentioned earlier, there was a US Navy surveillance plane that was monitoring the entire confrontation from above. And the real concern here is this is the sort of thing where any misstep could result in very serious implications of the nature that would involve drawing the US and the China together into potentially a situation where there might be conflict between the two sides. And it's got to be said as well that in recent weeks, the Philippines and China seem to have been upping the ante. The Philippines have been carrying international media on some of its naval vessels to try and demonstrate to the world some of the acts of aggression by the Chinese side. But despite all of this, Beijing doesn't seem to be deterred for the time being.
Well, 5 U.S. Special Operations troops were killed when their helicopter crashed into the Mediterranean Sea during a training mission. Search and rescue operations were launched immediately following the crash, and an investigation into its cause is underway. The troops aboard the helicopter were U.S. Army Special Operations personnel. The United States has deployed 2 aircraft carriers, the Ford and the Iron Shower, along with supporting ships and dozens of aircraft to the eastern Mediterranean. President Joe Biden and U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin expressed condolences in a statement. And the defense ministers of the United States and South Korea convened for security talks on Monday, where the leaders revised a bilateral security agreement aimed at deterring North Korea's advancing nuclear and missile threats. The tailored deterrence strategy is aimed at countering North Korea's nuclear weapons and other arms, according to an announcement of the agreement by the two countries 10 years ago. The Defense Ministry said that South Korea's Defense Minister Shin Won-sik and his U.S. counterpart Lloyd Austin signed the updated agreement at the security talks in Seoul. And the United States conducted airstrikes against 2 Iran-linked sites in eastern Syria in response to attacks against American forces in Syria and in Iraq. The response from U.S. forces marked the 3rd time in recent weeks that they carried out strikes against facilities used by Iranian proxies. In a statement, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said the strikes targeted a training facility near the city of Abu Kamal and a safe house near the city of Mayadeen. The U.S. military conducted airstrikes against a weapons storage facility and an ammunition storage area in Syria on October 26th and conducted subsequent airstrikes against a weapons storage facility on the 8th of November. Well, amid the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict, the Israel Defense Forces have said that their troops delivered 300 liters of fuel to the Shifa hospital for urgent medical purposes. A video released by the Israeli military on Sunday showed soldiers moving towards a building while holding gallon containers, saying they had offered fuel to the Shifa hospital in the Gaza Strip. Earlier, the Israeli military said it will help evacuate babies trapped at the Al-Shifa hospital. On the other hand, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has warned his countrymen against renewed Russian attacks on infrastructure as winter approaches. Zelensky said troops are anticipating attacks on the Eastern Front. The Ukrainian military said Russian attacks on the breakaway eastern city of Avdiivka had subsided in recent days but were likely to intensify in the coming days. Meanwhile, Russia claimed to have carried out multiple strikes on Ukrainian military targets, including ammunition and fuel depots, several artilleries and armored vehicles, as well as intercepting 2 HIMARS rockets and dozens of drones. On the other hand, Ukrainian forces launched several attacks on Russian troops, as well as their military equipment and ammunition depots. In addition, a Russian Kh-59 missile was also destroyed. And in Spain, tens of thousands of people protested against acting Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's plans to offer amnesty to Catalan separatists in a bid to win enough support for another term in office. The government secured a deal with Catalan separatist party Junts, which includes passing a contentious law granting amnesty to those convicted over Catalonia's attempt to secede from Spain in 2017. Sanchez's conservative opponents have accused him of putting the rule of law on the line of his own political gain. The People's Party had called for protest in the capitals of all Spain's regions. In Madrid, some 80,000 people turned out. And still to come on this edition of DD India Live. Rescue work in full swing to evacuate trapped workers from the collapsed under-construction tunnel in Uttarkashi district of India's Uttarakhand state. Dubai is witnessing the largest ever air show titled The Future of the Aerospace Industry today.
Welcome to Jaipur.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Lipakshi Khuran, and moving on. Rescue work is on at full swing to evacuate 40 trapped workers from an under-construction tunnel in Uttarkashi district of India's Uttarakhand state that collapsed early on Sunday morning. A 150-meter portion of a 4.5-kilometer-long proposed tunnel to link Silkhiara and Dandalgaon on Brahmkhal-Yamunotri highway in Uttarkashi district collapsed around 4 a.m. on Sunday. Officials supervising the rescue operation at the location said that all the trapped workers are safe and rescue teams have established contact with them using wireless sets. Oxygen is being pumped into the tunnel to ensure the workers have air supply.
अभी जो हमें खबर मिली है कि अंदर सारे के सारे जो हैं सुरक्षित हैं, उनको हमने जो है खाने के कुछ चिप्स और पानी की व्यवस्था उनको दे दी गई है और सब सुरक्षित हैं। हम उम्मीद करते हैं कि आज हम प्रयास करके उनको बाहर निकलने की पूरी कोशिश करेंगे। ये 40 की खबर है, हमारे से कम्युनिकेशन हुआ था तो उन्होंने बताया 40 लोग अंदर हैं, लेकिन सारे के सारे सुरक्षित हैं अभी।
Also, Uttarakhand CM Pushpar Singh Dhami has also visited the site and assured that government and administration are making all efforts to rescue stranded workers.
देखिए, जब से घटना हुई है तब से लगातार हम लोग इस घटना की जानकारी और जो भी बचाव का काम हो सकता है उसके लिए सभी से संपर्क कर रहे हैं और माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने भी कल पूरे इस घटनाक्रम की जानकारी ली है और साथ ही उन्होंने हर संभव जो सहायता है उसका उन्होंने हमें आश्वासन भी दिया है, भरोसा दिया है।
Moving on, the 18th edition of the Dubai Air Show, titled The Future of the Aerospace Industry, is happening in Dubai World Central today. The event, which is the largest to date, will host over 1,400 exhibitors from 95 countries. The event will feature over 180 commercial aircraft, including Airbus A320P2F, A321neo, A330neo, A400M Atlas, CMK-1, H225 and C295. The event will also feature the latest electrical vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, drones and UAVs. The event will also feature the UAE Space Agency's latest initiatives and advancements in sustainable aviation fuel and cleaner aviation technology. Also, the Indian Air Force contingent, including the light combat aircraft Tejas and the advanced light helicopter Dhruv, will showcase their static and aerial displays in the Dubai Air Show. The IAF is returning for their second appearance after the 2021 edition and will perform at the opening ceremony on the 13th of November. The participation also highlights India's aviation progress, featuring indigenous platforms like the Tejas and Dhruv. Well, the third week-long round of negotiations to hammer out a global plastics treaty kicked off today in Nairobi in Kenya after a preparatory meeting on Saturday as the United Nations Environment Programme seeks to develop a legally binding instrument regulating plastic pollution worldwide. Officials are bracing for tough negotiations over whether to limit the amount of plastic being produced or just to focus on the management of waste. Among the issues to be discussed in the session from today to November 19th are the principles and the scope of instrument, institutional arrangements and possible final provisions. Well, climate activist Greta Thunberg was interrupted while speaking at a protest in Amsterdam as a protester told her that he was there for a climate demonstration, not a political view. Tens of thousands of protesters marched demanding immediate action against climate change 10 days before the country holds a general election. Around 70,000 people joined the march, including former EU climate chiefs Frans Timmermans, who will lead the combined Labour and Green parties at the upcoming election. Organisers said the turnout was the largest ever at a climate protest in the Netherlands. Meanwhile, Iceland authorities are preparing for a volcanic eruption in the southwest of the island due to a series of earthquakes and evidence of magma spreading underground. The Icelandic Meteorological Office warns of a considerable risk due to the size and rate of the underground magma intrusion. The Civil Protection Agency has ordered the evacuation of Grindavik, a fishing town with around 3,000 residents. Well, people in parts of the African continent are facing severe hardships and frequent displacements as some regions are under the grip of erratic weather conditions, alternating between floods and drought.
Nearly 1 million people in Somalia are facing severe impacts of heavy rains and flooding as the El Nino global weather phenomena wreaks havoc in East Africa. The flooding disaster took place just a few months after the Horn of Africa country endured a historic drought. Displaced individuals living in camps for displaced people due to recent flash floods earlier this year are facing fresh hardships. Amina Ado, a local resident, was displaced by flash floods twice this year from her home in an agricultural town in central Somalia. Ado recounted the hardships faced by those affected, emphasizing the urgent need for assistance from the Somali government and its partners.
I was living in an IDP camp in Beledweyne when flood waters swept away our shelters. We relocated to higher ground here. As you can see, we don't have proper shelter, no food and even water as well as latrines. We call upon the Somali government and its partners to provide urgent assistance.
Another victim, Hussein Ali, said that the weather is very changeable with temperature extremes and there are constant struggles with public health and sanitation.
We have been here for about 10 days with no water and latrines. It's very hot during the day and very cold and rainy during the night, so we request help from non-governmental organizations.
Despite Somali government's efforts, several towns remain submerged and the prospects of rain subsiding in the near future appears dim. Nevertheless, humanitarian initiatives persist despite frustrating logistical hurdles. Somalia isn't the only country in the region being affected by the global weather phenomena known as El Nino. Kenya and Ethiopia have also reported deaths and displacements due to heavy rainfall and flooding. The UN says it will provide $25 million to jumpstart life-saving assistance for those affected. Amit Mukherjee for DD India.
And now let's take a look at news from around the world. A whirlwind of smoke and ashes engulfed the East Santa Cruz area of Bolivia. Fire whirls and tires in Noel Kempf National Park caused by turbulent conditions led to a blaze that engulfed the Buena Vista community, prompting Santa Cruz officials to request helicopter and army assistance in fighting the fires. Chilean breast cancer survivors participated in a traditional Chinese dragon boat race for rehab and community ties. Over 130 women participated in 200-meter regattas at Santiago's Karen Lake Park. The race, organized by Fortail Sinos Chile with Chinese embassy support, aimed to promote upper limb motion and prevent lymphedema, a common side effect of breast cancer. Dragon boat racing is a popular tradition in Asia. The Red Bull Crazy Cars competition returned to Argentina for the first time in 10 years with over 30,000 spectators and 30 teams. The event featured over 30 cars, including wine barrels, toilets and Argentine stew. The winner, a vintage ambulance cart, completed the circuit in less than a minute. And in the Cricket World Cup, India defeated Netherlands at the M. Chinnaswamy Stadium in Bengaluru in the last league match. Chasing a mammoth 411-run target, the Dutch batsmen could only manage to reach 250 runs in 47.5 overs. For Netherlands, Teja Nidamonuru scored 54 runs, while Sibrand Egelbench scored 45 runs. Earlier, opting to bat first, India were off to a great start with Rohit Sharma and Shubman Gill smashing half-centuries. Kohli followed with a 51-run knock. Shreyas Iyer and KL Rahul then stitched a 208-run partnership for the fourth wicket, taking the men in blue to 410 runs for the loss of 4 wickets, which is their highest total in this edition of World Cup. Shreyas Iyer smashed an unbeaten 128, while KL Rahul scored 102. For Netherlands, Busty Lade took 2 wickets. After victory, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi congratulated the team on their fantastic victory against the Netherlands. Well, the final season of Netflix's The Crown premiered in Los Angeles on November 12th, following the events leading up to Princess Diana's death in 1997. Netflix's series starring Elizabeth Debicki as Diana has returned with star-studded premieres. The series has seen numerous actors portraying the royal family. Claire Foy and Matt Smith is portrayed by various actors. Showrunner Peter Morgan expressed his enjoyment in writing about the 1950s.
Is unlikely to die down anytime soon.
The press are on our tails constantly.
All one wants is for that girl to find peace.
Well, that's all for this edition of DD India Live. But let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Lipakshi Khurana from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live.